what I will say is that violence is never something where they work up so much that they become uncontrollable at any time. It's a choice. So, for example, we don't, by and large, see too many people at a social gathering being violent. It's often done behind closed doors. And so, I knew we saw this so many times when we were going to jobs where we were responding to emergency calls in the middle of the night, and it's really silent, and you can hear, I don't know if you've ever experienced it, but when you get out of your car and you park up the road and you close the car door, and it just reverberates down the street because it's so silent, and you're walking up and you can hear what's going on in the house, and you can hear the arguments occurring, and you can hear your footsteps, as you're putting one foot in front of the other, and you go and bang on the door, and suddenly everything will just go quiet. And then we have a really nice person as such that answers the door and tells us that nothing's happened, nothing's going on, everything's fine, and so forth. So what my experience is that I've seen is that when I go to the supermarket, I don't see many people arguing or hitting their partners or hurting their partners in public. It's all done behind closed doors. So there is that element of choice there in terms of where things are done as well, and that's a lot to do with the control that happens as well. So it's getting them to understand how they manage that, and because it is a conscious decision that they make at times.
I mean, and I could be totally wrong here, but I would suggest that it is a conscious decision up to a point of boiling, at which point they're out of control, but presumably but a knock on the door can be the pattern interrupt. So there needs to be an interrupt in that. Presumably, we need to turn the gas off if you want to stop the water boiling. But at boiling point, they could be uncontrollable, and you can see people going, I'm sorry afterwards. But there's been a series of choices up to that point, and they just simply haven't made a decision at some point to step out of a pattern that's going to lead them to violence. And if they've been there before. So like you said, at the social gathering, they may be simmering inside, going, just wait till I get home. And they could be like that until they're storing it up rather than recognizing that this is an issue that needs to stop at some point. It needs to stop. And it's not going to come from somebody telling them they need to stop.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it almost needs to come from them going, okay, I just need to do something. But I don't want to risk all the control I have in my life. And when control is the issue, going and confessing to someone means I actually have lost control. And that's presumably the toughest part. So exposure is forced confession, but going and saying, I might need some help, is actually the fastest way, I would imagine, the fastest way to getting a positive result or a positive outcome.
Absolutely. And, it's so challenging for anyone, and I commend anyone who reaches out for help, because that is so significant on so many levels. And, often people will only reach out once, and so the responses that we have around that is so critical. It's vital in terms of that we get our responses right around that to provide the right support. It's massive.
What do we need to do if somebody reaches out and goes, I'm finding myself doing this? What would be a great way to respond?
So what I do is we don't need many words, and even if it's just silence, because often a lot of people really find it difficult to have these difficult, challenging conversations. I see it all the time. It's just like, well, that's really uncomfortable. I don't know what to say. They clam up. Classic example is often we find when there's a funeral, a lot of people can't even acknowledge someone that they've known for a really long time about a death in the family, for example. And so when we're having these difficult conversations, people just don't know what to do and say. So I would say if you don't know, just silence and acknowledgement, and just sitting in that space with someone and just sharing that without anything is so supportive, because it doesn't need judgment from the person listening. It just needs you can just say, hey, thank you for sharing that with me. That must have been really difficult for you to say. Even something like that. It's around, or you may say, I just want to acknowledge
they
you.
did thing to tell you, not.
Absolutely, not the behaviour, but the taking them into your confidence is huge, and so that's what I would suggest.